Here are the 4 keys you need to use to perform basic arithmetic using your calculator: multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Press 2 plus 3 times 8 minus 6. Execute. The answer is 20. Notice the calculator followed the correct order of operations. It multiplied 3 times 8 first, then it added the 2, and finally subtracted 6. We can change the order of operations by using parentheses. Let me show you. Open parentheses, 2 plus 3, close parentheses, times, open parentheses, 8 minus 6, close parentheses, execute. The answer is 10. It's a different answer because it's a different order of operations. I do want to point out 2 things. First, you don't need to type in this multiplication symbol. The calculator understands implied multiplication. Also, if the very last thing you need to do is to type in a close parenthesis, you can leave it out. Let me show you. Open parenthesis, 2 plus 3, close parenthesis, open parenthesis, 8 minus 6, execute. The answer is still 10. Notice there is no multiplication symbol here and no close parenthesis. This is the key you would need to use if you want to perform a negation or to input negative numbers. To perform a subtraction, use this key. By the way, the negation key and the subtraction key are pretty much interchangeable on this calculator, but not always. So I highly recommend you use the negation key when you have to perform a negation, and when you want to subtract 2 values, use the subtraction key. And now let's do some examples. For the first problem, press the negative sign, then 3 plus 5, execute. The answer is 2. Second problem, 8 times negative 7, execute. The answer is negative 56. And finally, for the third problem, type in negative 2 minus a negative 6. Execute. The answer is 4. Notice the minus sign is slightly wider than the negative sign. That way you could easily distinguish between the two. The main set of grouping symbols that you can use on your calculator are the parentheses, and these are the ones you should be using for mathematical computations. However, there are also braces and brackets, but don't use these. They serve other purposes which I will get to in other videos. For example, if you're given the following expression, notice that it contains parentheses, brackets, and braces. To evaluate this on a calculator, First, you should rewrite it as follows. By the way, since it ends only with closing parentheses, you don't have to even include these when you input this in your calculator. Let me show you. Three, open parenthesis, 2 plus 8, open parenthesis, negative 1 plus 4, open parenthesis, 6 plus 5, and then execute. The answer is 1038. This is the button you need to press to input a fraction, either proper or improper, in your calculator. Just above it is the function you need to use to input a mixed number. To alternate between fraction and decimal format, use this key. The function above it is used to alternate between mixed numbers and improper fractions. And finally, here's your decimal point. There are a couple of ways of inputting a fraction into your calculator. First, just press the fraction key that's represented by A, B over C. This provides a template on your screen. Now, input the numerator, 1. To go into the denominator, you can press either the right arrow or the down arrow. I will alternate between the two in my videos. Next, input the denominator. Finally, to get out of the fraction, press the right arrow key. Now let's continue inputting our expression. Plus, another way of inputting a fraction is if the numerator is just a single number, type that first. Then press the fraction key, followed by the denominator. This is a little bit faster. Finally, press execute. The answer is 11/10. Now, if you don't see this answer in your calculator, your settings are different than what I have. I recommend you watch my previous video, recommended settings, so that our calculators are in sync. To change this into decimal, press this key, the fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction conversion key. The answer is 1.1. And you can toggle between decimals and fractions by pressing this key. Now, since this is an improper fraction, I can also rewrite it as a mixed number. To do that, press the Shift key and then the fraction decimal conversion key. The answer is 1 1/10. First, press the fraction key, and now let's input our numerator, 2 plus 6. Then the down arrow or right arrow to go into the denominator. Let's type that out. 1 minus 12. 1, 2. Execute. The answer is negative 8/11. To convert to a decimal, press the fraction decimal conversion key. The calculator does round off the final digit to a 3. Make a note of that. Press the fraction key, then input the numerator. 5, fraction key again, 8. Down arrow, 6, fraction key, 13, 1, 3. Now double check what you input into the calculator. Yep, that's definitely a fraction divided by a fraction. And execute. Let's convert this to a decimal by pressing the fraction decimal conversion key. And finally, we can convert this into a mixed number by pressing Shift and then the fraction decimal conversion key. First, input the whole number portion of your mixed number, 5. Then press Shift and then the fraction key. That will give us a mixed number. Now type in the fractional portion of your mixed number. 1, right arrow or down arrow, doesn't matter, and then 3. Let's get out of our mixed number, right arrow, plus 2, Shift, fraction key, and then 3, right arrow, 8, and execute. Traditionally, if you start with mixed numbers, you should end with a mixed number. So let's go ahead and convert this to a mixed number. Press Shift and then the fraction decimal conversion key. Our final answer is 7 and 17/24. To convert a decimal into a fraction, first input your decimal number. For example, 0.025, and then execute. Finally, press the fraction to decimal conversion key. Our answer is 1/40. Let's take a look at our second example. 5.3. Execute. Convert to a fraction. We can also convert this into a mixed number by pressing Shift and then the fraction decimal conversion key. And now let's do our third example. 0.2571. Execute. Convert to a fraction. And there's our answer. To save a bit of time, I preloaded all my examples into the calculator already. The key thing to remember when you want to convert a repeating decimal into a fraction is that you need to type in 14 digits of your repeating decimal. For example, 0.33333, 14 places. You would press execute and then your fraction decimal conversion key, and you would get 1/3. For the second example, 0.242424 forever, type in 14 digits, execute, fraction conversion key, you get 8/33. And finally, 0.142857, 14285714. Note we have to have 14 digits. You would press execute, convert to a fraction, and you get 1/7. Here's where the constant pi is located on your calculator. To input pi into your calculator, press Shift and then the EXP button down here. Press Execute, and you're given the exact form of pi on your calculator display. To get the decimal approximation, press the fraction decimal conversion key, even though it's not a fraction. For our second example, type in 5 and then Shift EXP for the pi, execute, and let's get the decimal approximation, and there it is. Our last example is 3.8 pi execute. Notice what happened. It changed the 3.8 into its fractional representation automatically. We could also make it a mixed number by pressing Shift and then the fraction decimal conversion key. And then to get the decimal approximation for this expression, type the fraction decimal conversion key. To find the square of a number, press here. To find the square of 9, first press the number 9, and then the x squared key up here. And finally, execute. The answer is 81. For our second example, we want to find the square of a fraction. So just input the fraction first, 2, fraction key, 7, get out of the fraction, right arrow, and then press the x squared button. Even though it looks like just the 2's being squared, the calculator is really squaring the entire fraction. If you don't like the way this looks, enclose the fraction within a set of parentheses. In this case, it's okay, press execute. There's our answer, 4/49. For our third example, we want to find the square of -4. This is the incorrect way of doing it. -4, and then press the x squared button. Execute. The answer is not supposed to be -16. The reason the calculator gave this answer is because of the order of operations. It squared the 4 first and then it negated the answer. To get the correct answer, you need to enclose negative numbers within a set of parentheses before squaring them. That is very important to remember. So go ahead and type in open parenthesis, -4, close parenthesis, and then square it. And finally, execute. Our correct answer is 16. Use this function if you want to find the reciprocal or to raise a value to the negative first power. Press the number 3, then Shift, and the right parenthesis or close parenthesis key. Above it, there's your x to the negative first power, which stands for the reciprocal. And finally, execute. Let's go ahead and change this into a fraction by pressing the fraction decimal conversion key. The answer is 1/3. For our second example, let's input our fraction, 23, press the fraction key, and then type in 47. Get out of the fraction, and now take the reciprocal. Shift, right parenthesis. Again, it looks like just the numerator is being raised to the negative first power, but it's really the entire fraction. If you don't like this, enclose the fraction within a set of parentheses. But it's actually okay. So press execute. Notice the numerators and denominators have switched places, which is exactly what happens when you take the reciprocal of a fraction. To raise a value to any exponent, use the following key. For the first example, I want to raise 3 to the 4th power. So press the number 3, then look for the caret key, which is right here. It's also known as the power key or the exponent key. I will usually just say power. Let's go ahead and press it, and then the number 4. And finally execute. The answer is 81. For our second example, we want to raise 4 to the negative second power. Type in 4, power, negative 2, execute. Let's make it a fraction by pressing the fraction decimal conversion key. The answer is 1/16. For our third example, type in 9. Now I could use the power key, but it's just more efficient to just press the x squared key. Then minus 2 power 3 and execute. Next, type in 4 power 3 and then square it. Execute. There's our answer. And finally, let's raise a fraction to an exponent. 5, press the fraction key. 7, make sure you get out of the fraction by pressing the right arrow key, and then power 3 to cube it. Execute. And there's our final answer. Use this function to perform a square root. To find the value of the square root of 2, you need to first locate the square root key. It's just above the x squared key. So press Shift and then x squared. In the future, I'll just say Shift square root. Then type in the 2. Execute. The calculator produces an exact answer. If you want the approximate decimal representation, press the fraction decimal conversion key, even though it's not a fraction. And there it is. For our second example, we want to simplify the square root of 48. So type in Shift square root 48, and execute. And we get an exact answer of 4 times the square root of 3, or simply 4 rad 3. In decimal form, it would look like the following. For our third example, we can have more complicated expressions within the radical. For example, shift square root 4 squared plus 3 squared. Execute. The answer is 5. And finally, let's simplify an expression dealing with a couple of radicals. 13 shift square root of 2. Now be sure you get out of the radical by pressing the right arrow key and then continue. Minus shift square root of 8 and execute. There's our exact answer. Let's see what it looks like as a decimal. Press the fraction decimal conversion key. There it is. To save a bit of time, I've already inputted the 5 examples that will show you how the calculator rationalizes the denominators of different expressions. For the first example, we have 1 over the square root of 2. That will reduce to just the square root of 2 over 2. Next, square root of the quantity 36 over 49 reduces to just 6/7. Rad 2 over rad 3 becomes rad 6 over 3. 5 divided by the quantity 1 plus rad 3 becomes -5 plus 5 rad 3 all over 2. And finally, just to show you some limitations on how the calculator operates, sometimes it will not give an exact form. For example, this expression can only be represented as a decimal on this calculator. Use this function to perform a cube root. This calculator actually has a dedicated function for the cube root. It's located just above the left parenthesis key, right there. So go ahead and press Shift and then the left parenthesis key. In the future, I'm just going to say Shift cube root. Next, let's type in 8 and then execute. The answer is 2. Let's try another example. Shift cube root of -1, 2, 5. Execute. We get -5 as the answer. Now you may be wondering, can the calculator rationalize the cube roots? Well, let's find out. 1 fraction shift cube root of 5, execute. Nope, it only gives a decimal representation. Use this function to find the nth root, or xth root. To find the fourth root of 81, you first need to input the index of the radical, 4. So let's do that. Then, look just above the power key is the function we're interested in, the Nth Root function, or x radical. So press Shift, and then the power key, or just Shift x radical. Type in 81, and execute. Our answer is 3. For our second example, we want to find the fifth root of 77. So once again, always type in the index of the radical first, 5. Then Shift x radical, type in 77, and execute. And there's our answer.